Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our virtual roundtable on detection and response, outsource or not to outsource. This session is brought to you by Middle East and Africa's leading value-added distributor Spire Solutions and one of the world leading cybersecurity solution providers, Rapid7. To all of you that are joining us from the Middle East, good afternoon. And if we have any attendees from Africa, Europe, or other such parts, good morning to you and welcome once again to today's session. Before we get started, some quick housekeeping rules. Can I have the next slide, please? All of you are currently on mute and you will remain on mute throughout the summit. But that doesn't mean that you can't engage with us. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat or question section of this GoToWebinar platform. We will take the questions as and when time permits, and we also have a dedicated session towards the end of this virtual event, which we have dedicated for answering any questions that you might have and to create that level of interactivity. My name is Naveen Bharadwaj. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Spire Solutions based here in Dubai. I'm very proud to welcome you all on behalf of Spire Solutions as well as our partner Rapid7 to this interactive webinar. Now, what is this webinar all about and why are we organizing this? Developing and maturing an effective detection and response program is not as simple as just buying and implementing the latest security products. You need to have a dedicated SOC. You need to have highly skilled staff, specialized security experts, 24/7 monitoring of the technology to make sure that you are truly ahead of the curve, as cliche as it might sound. Now, creating such a program obviously is not cheap. It can be expensive. It's difficult to maintain, and it also provides very limited assurance that you've actually advanced your overall security. So how did certain information and some questions, regardless all of this, might still remain unanswered, right? So how did the attacker get in? What tools were used? Where did the attacker move to? And what credentials were used? What data was accessible? What was it used for, right? Where was it taken from? Is the attacker still in your environment? What steps can they take? What can you take as a remediation measure? What can you do to prevent these kind of attacks from happening in future? So there are lots of other questions. So on one side, costs and operations is a challenge, and on the other side, there are lots and lots of questions that might go unanswered. So to help you answer those questions and to help you find a partner that can be your trusted security advisor / partner with your detection and response efforts and initiatives, we are organizing today's virtual roundtable, and we hope that by the end of the session today, many of your doubts and the questions that I talked about will all be answered. Who do we have with us? Who are the experts that are going to help us with their thoughts, with their knowledge about cybersecurity in general, and then detection and response in specific? With me today, I have Khalil Farhat, who is the security solutions engineer from Rapid7. Khalil will be walking us through a fantastic demonstration. We have Matthew Ryder, who's the Director of Sales Engineering at Rapid7. And of course, we have also Richard Harris, who's the Director of the Managed Detection and Response Business Unit across EMEA region for Rapid7. So Khalil, Richard, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. Hello, welcome everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you all with us, and we hope that at the end of this session, our audience walk away having known a lot more than what they currently do, and of course also with lots of interest to engage with all of us and have us as their trusted security advisors. So Matthew, Khalil, Richard, once again, thank you. Welcome to today's show. We'll engage you during your respective slots. So again, just a reminder, you will all remain on mute, but that does not mean you need not ask questions. We want this session to be interactive. We want to take your questions as and when possible, but we promise you that at least towards the end of this session, we'll answer as many questions as we can. And after the session, you have direct access to talk to us about your cybersecurity challenges, concerns, requirements, or just have brainstorming with us. Without further ado, I know Khalil is itching, so I want to engage Khalil right now to get started with the session, help us understand the value proposition that we're bringing to the table, and pretty much set the context for what you can all expect today. Khalil, over to you.
Thank you, Naveen. Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you again for joining this webinar from Rapid7 Inspire. My name is Khalil. I'm the pre-sales consultant for Rapid7 in the Middle East region. I'm delighted to be joined, as introduced by Naveen, by my colleagues, Matt Ryder, Directors of Sales Engineering International at Rapid7, and Richard Harris, who is the Director of Managed Detection and Response Service across EMEA and APAC for Rapid7. So quick as well introduction from myself for the expert we have on this webinar. So Matt is a passionate technology industry executive who began his IT career at Microsoft in the 1990, and he has spent the last 13 years helping organizations defend against and learn from cyber attacks. So he started first as a director of strategic support and services at Sophos, and he's been now for the last 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, as international director and spokesperson for Rapid7. Richard is leading the Rapid7 Managed Detection and Response, the MDR, Rapid7 MDR growth and partnership development across the EMEA and APAC regions. He has over 20 years of experience, starting as a practitioner in UK law enforcement in the 90s as well, building management operations outside the US, eventually running the EMEA region for FireEye Managed Service before making the move to Rapid7. Welcome on board, Matt and Richard. So what we'll be doing today, we'll be talking about the threat detection and response and answering the question of the day. Should you outsource the detection and response, or you should keep it in-house? However, before we start talking about the detection and response, I would like to take a moment to reflect on where the cybersecurity stands in this world of digital business or digital world. As we all know, there is no doubt that we live in a world of digitalization. Each and every organization is investing in digital initiative. So when talk about initiative, there is new technology which are adopted every day. The workloads which are shifted, migrated to the cloud, talking about cloud migration and adoption, new application and services published. On top of this, the pandemic has also accelerated this digital transformation journey. Why? Because it has transformed the way we collaborate. And companies are striving on helping their workforce, not only to adapt to the new normal and to ensure their businesses operation are not halted during this challenging time, but as well they are still looking to grow and expand. So if we refer to the report published by Forrester on Prediction 2021 for cloud computing, 35% is the expected year-on-year surge in public cloud. All this is driven by COVID-19. I hope you guys out there all safe and doing well. So while the technology is evolving at a fast pace, the challenge for the security is to keep up with, keeping out with this innovation, with this technology evolving, and manage the new risk that these technologies are implying. So the security achievement gap is also accelerating exponentially, and exposure is growing. And this graph is to show you that we are at a fast pace when it comes to evolving with all the new technology we are adopting, and then there is a huge gap between the managed risk and the unmanaged risk these days. So every day we see a constant stream of attack or threats. So we have every day we hear about a new story: zero-day attack, vulnerabilities, breaches, malwares. You might heard as well, maybe last week, every week we're hearing big news about this. And it's no surprise that the attack and risk surface is also getting larger and growing as a result of the pandemic. More than 1/3 of senior cybersecurity technology executives surveyed by CNBC last year say that cybersecurity risk have increased as a majority of their employees working from home. So what's happening now in this world? As the world is struggling to address the mounting challenges of the pandemic, we are facing more and more cybersecurity attack, and we have already seen early example of this. And the logic as per the security professional and analyst is simple. So the bad actors these days are perceiving the company along with its employees to be otherwise occupied and under stress. And thus, the defenses are weakened. So what's happening is then there is a new opportunity for those attackers or bad actors to inflict damage and extract financial gain which is heightened in these challenging days. So as business, we have to ensure we are working in the right way to protect our employees, privacy, suppliers, client, as well ensuring that our business and operation are still going on the way it was, and why not looking for the growth. So now as cybersecurity continue to become more of a mainstream and concern, let's talk about the challenges that security team are facing these days. And really the theme that we hear on repeat, whether we are talking to our customers, to our prospects, as well as security professionals and analysts, is the theme of complexity. Security is becoming more and more complex every day. This complexity presents itself in many different ways. But here, there are few key things that we hear about a lot. Starting with visibility is lacking. As we talked about the digital initiatives, migrating to the cloud, investing in hybrid infrastructure, adopting more application and services, remote working during the pandemic itself, the attack and risk surface, as I said, has been growing. And so it's really hard to keep track of each and everything, to have visibility over all of our users and environment. And that's the big challenge, as visibility is foundation when it comes to security, is pillar when it comes to security. The reality is we cannot secure what we don't see. And I hope you guys all agree with me on this. Another thing we hear a lot as well, which is alerts are too noisy and too much data kill the data itself. So to try to get the visibility on everything running in the environment these days, a lot of people are using many different tools to try to look and see what's going out there in their environment. So they end up with more complexity as the alert cannon ensures, with tens of hundreds, even thousands of alerts blasting the organization unified work queue on a daily basis. So analysts then go and try to sift through all this different, or the pile of alerts itself, looking for those of the highest fidelity, highest priority, and the utmost urgency. So in a time-consuming process, security team need a solution, technology, or a service which help reduce the false positive, improve the alert fatigue cycle, while enabling the analyst to focus on what matters most. The third point here is the investigations are taking too long. And this is clear because of the fact or we have a lack of visibility and alert fatigue. So the time to detect and contain an incident is taking way too long in order for the customers or the analysts to be able to get this detection and contain the alert, while the attacker and the bad actors are jumping from a system to another system, lateral movement and so. So the last but not least, I would talk about it now when it comes to the challenges security team are facing. It's getting harder and harder for security professional because of the lack of resources, the complexity of environment, different tools. So what each and every organization is looking at is to drive the efficiency to enable their team and security team to focus on what matters most. I'm gonna stop here for now, and I'm handing this over to my colleagues Matt and Richard, who will be expanding further on the subject matter. To you, Matt and Richard.
Thanks, Khalil. That was a fantastic introduction, and it is, an extremely difficult time in cybersecurity, even before you factored in 2020. Those of you that haven't met Khalil as well, please, he's a fantastic source of knowledge, and I would say reach out to him. Very pleased to be here today. You've already heard our introduction, so I'm going to skip quickly through those. No one likes seeing their own face, least of all Richard and I. Great face for radio is what my mum always told me. But I am proud to be wearing my Spire pin. 7 years at Rapid7, of course, also means 7 years of working with Spire in the region, and we're very, very pleased to be invited here by Naveen and the team today. So we've only got 20 minutes this morning, and we are going to try and answer this quite large question, whether to outsource or not to outsource your detection and response. We do want to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions as we go. Please do use that chat, and hopefully we'll get time, as long as we keep to time, to answer these at the end. Otherwise, we'll certainly answer them in a blog or an email. Also, if we reference any of our research, of which there is an awful lot at Rapid7, we'll make sure that we send out those resources as well. So first of all, let's talk about people. I think maybe more than any other cybersecurity discipline, except for maybe penetration testing, DNR, detection and response, conjures up the vision of cybersecurity experts, whether that's SOC analysts, SOC managers, SOC directors like Richard, threat hunters, red teams, incident response, etc. Yet, despite many industries suffering untold job losses through 2020, cybersecurity is still in the midst of a colossal global talent shortage, and we can all feel that. You see that in the burnout of teams, you see that in the difficulty to hire people, and more importantly, retaining them. In November, ISC Squared, the organization behind the CISP qualification, reported a global shortage of 4 million cybersecurity professionals, and that was actually an increase for Europe and the Middle East. So it's a perennial problem. So Richard, talk to me about this first challenge for detection response. And is this a challenge that's more difficult, less difficult for DNR? What's the kind of the thoughts around how this affects whether you should outsource?
Yeah, hi Matt, and hello everybody. So yeah, I think you're right to point out that the talent shortage is a global shortage. It's been around for a number of years and been highlighted in numerous reports, and I think it's something that will continue indefinitely for quite a few years to come. I mean, as a recruiter within my own kind of industry, within my own business, I don't think there's been a time when we haven't been looking for people to be able to come in and work in our SOC operations and in our incident response teams. And I think we'll continue to hire. I mean, we've never really not had headcount. It's almost the challenge is trying to find people with the right skills and the right experience that can actually come in and provide value to both our business and to our customers. And if you can find the talent, I think the bigger challenge today, to be honest, is retaining them. Because there is a huge demand, there's a lot of competition. We're all kind of vying for the same people in the industry. Heavy competition in the market, and really high salaries. It's prompting people to move roles, particularly if they're in a role where they don't feel valued or they've got lots of menial tasks to perform. And actually, just recently, there's been I've been really surprised in the last 12 months around some of the tactics that the recruiters are actually applying. They're very brazen now. They'll actually ring the SOC hotline and try and recruit people from the SOC operations because there is such a shortage. So everyone's in the same boat, I think, trying to find staff. But if you look as well at how the actual industry, so DNR is a particularly very specific subset of the traditional sort of managed security services that you provide. And it requires very deep technical knowledge and understanding across a broad set of skills. If you think about probably 10 years ago when we were kind of looking at incident response was probably the key driver, and also bear in mind that detect and response, certainly managed detect and response, is fairly new. It's only really been around for 8-9 years as a kind of a deeper, a narrower view of traditional managed security. The skills are getting broader. I mean, 7-8 years ago, finding people that had host-based forensic skills in Windows, maybe a bit of Linux, was fairly common and probably good enough. Now you're looking for talent that understands multiple operating systems, Linux, Mac OS as well. Also, we're still looking for people that have skills in network and actually be able to dissect packet captures, be able to understand network connections in the environment, and also be able to perform basic static dynamic malware analysis, have incident response skills, not just the ability to actually dig into a particular system and investigate, but also leadership skills to be able to run an investigation, be able to actually kind of orchestrate other people, because the investigations are getting larger. The rate of compromise when an attacker gets in can really accelerate very quickly. It's very unlikely that a single person can perform all the roles that they need to in an investigation, so it tends to be much broader. And now, of course, we've got the cloud complexity, seeing a lot of customers move into cloud. And it's not just one cloud, multiple clouds, they all have different security events and management systems. So now actually when we're looking for those traditional skills, we're also now looking to find analysts and train them to be able to understand cloud-based technologies, containerization, Kubernetes, all the sort of modern technologies that businesses are using to operate. So it's a broad ask. And then you've got to consider the kind of 8x5 versus 24/7 operations. The attackers don't necessarily work your working hours today. It's very common and becoming increasingly common to see attacks or attackers take advantage of weekends when they know that most companies have their security teams at home. They might just be on call, so it can lead to delays in investigations and analysis. And I think the days are soon disappearing where 8x5 operations is adequate, and even with on call. And if you then start to look at the cost of trying to implement an operations process that goes from 8x5 to 24/7, the cost gets very significant. It's not just adding a couple of extra people. I mean, to run 24/7 operations consistently and long term, you're looking at probably a minimum of 9 analysts working a number of shifts, because you've got to cover for kind of annual leave requirements, for sickness, and even then, if you've got 3 people per shift, potentially 1 could be out sick, 1 could be on holiday, it leaves 1 person. So the cost of actually finding talent and then the number of kind of people you need to run operations is a challenge. And again, hence the reason I don't think there's been a better justification for outsourcing some of your kind of security requirements to a provider, someone like ourselves. And I make no bones about it. I mean, I have no skin in the game in terms of whether you want to outsource your provision to an entity like ourselves, where we can provide sort of coverage for you, or whether you build it yourself. Rapid7 is very fortunate that we obviously have the technology that you can actually buy. It's been honed. Leverage the expertise that we have developed in our MDR kind of service, so we can provide you with technology. All you've got to do is sort of add the processes and the people. So either way, there's a solution there for you. And I think this conversation is really about trying to just help understand why you might consider outsourcing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and thank you for that. And it's you're right, and Khalil's going to show us a little bit of the actual product that you can buy a little bit later. But yeah, it's very symbiotic, isn't it? It's been very much built, kind of passed between our MDR team and the product team back and forth and honed. So that's good. And yeah, I remember my Sophos days when Mac had just 5 official viruses that we had detection for. But obviously, as we know, that's changed, and attackers will always be opportunistic and always go for where they think people aren't looking, whether that's in terms of an operating system, a container, or indeed, as you say, overnight if you're running an 8x5, and it's crazy like that. So that's good. So basically what you're saying is, maybe getting to 24/7 is one thing, but staying there is another, keeping people engaged, 9 people being the absolute minimum. That's good to know. Okay.
If you consider night shifts, I mean, to get 24/7, we operate a follow the sun model for that exact reason, and that we want to retain our people. I mean, good people don't necessarily have to work nights. They'll soon be snapped up by another provider who will put them in a position where they don't have to work nights. So that's a consideration as well. And you'll find that's why a lot of MDR providers offer follow the sun, because it's around trying to provide good, healthy, clean, and valued working environments for the resources that you do manage to hire and retain.
It's a really good point, actually. Yeah, I'd always thought of it from the customer point of view, but you're right. Who likes working nights? So we've talked a little bit there about the specialization of the staff and how you need different skill sets and much broader skill sets and also deeper skill sets now. What other areas of specialization, and I've given it away by putting of everything, but talk to us a little bit about some of the other areas of specialization that you need if you're considering doing this yourself, or you're considering an MDR provider.
Good question, Matt. And I think you've got to consider it's more than just having a SOC with some analysts, monitoring alerts and events. So, if you can find and retain the talent, you've got to make the best use of their time and their skill sets. So firstly, you need a specialization of people that can help minimize the I suppose the copy and paste kind of efforts within the business. So a single pane of glass, for example, you don't want your key talent having to perform repetitive tasks. And also there's the element around how do you make sure that they're looking at the most valuable alerts or events that are happening or occurring. When I've spoken to customers, it's not uncommon for them to be receiving 10,000 or more events per day in their SOC operations. And so how do they make the decision around what's the most important thing to look at? And a big part of what you get with an MDR provider is we have a large investment in threat detection and curation. So again, it's not just about monitoring the alerts. You've got to have a team of people that are constantly tuning and refining the detections that you have, and again in the technology that you've got deployed, so that you can put your people to work more effectively. What you don't want them doing is spending hours and hours looking at low priority, low fidelity alerts if you can help it. How do you know what events, which alerts are the most significant, which are likely to lead to kind of more, are an indication, I suppose, of an active attacker in your environment. So threat intelligence and curation is a large part of it. So and that's a specialism in its own right. I mean, that's privy to a degree, I think, in its own right. I've never been heavily involved in the threat detection curation side of things. I've always been, I suppose, a vendor from that team, and that my job is to take the threat intelligence that we curate from our team. And again, there's numerous threat feeds you can purchase. I think a lot of the specialization there is to try and how do you make those threat feeds relevant to your business, your industry, your region, because a lot of these threat feeds can be quite noisy and sort of not directly relevant to the operations or your core business and the threats and risks that you find particularly challenging. Then if you do actually get a threat detection set up, so you need a threat detection team to help manage and curate those threats, the analyst team to do the triage investigation. When you do find something that's important, you need to pass it off to them incident responders, sort of threat handlers, people that have the skills and the ability to come in and perform deep dive forensics, traditional incident response. Ideally, fully remotely. You don't really want to have to waste the time deploying people with boots on the ground to a site and to do dead box forensics. And I think it's key that detect and response is much more than traditional dead box forensics. Haven't done that for 9 or 10 years now. It's really about trying to get to the information, and that's then dependent on your tooling and your software and your security investment that you've got. Many vendors, tools, and I'm a real technologist. I do love the technology that's available today. It's never been cheaper or more effective, but it generates noise and they don't often work together effectively. So then you're talking about possibly having a team to actually then curate and script and make sense of all the different tools, bring it together under a single pane of glass for your team to then get the maximum benefit. And then again, you may need specialist resources as well, such as if you find a particular malware threat, it may not be clear cut from the detections, what exactly you're dealing with. You might need to find people that have the capability to reverse engineer that potential binary to figure out what it's doing, what are the indicators that you need to then pull from that to go look further afield. And so you're looking at having the ability to get access to reverse engineering people. I mean, they're not cheap, they're very hard to find, and they like to play all the time. And so, again, hiring them to yourselves, are they going to be engaged enough within your environment to, have a fulfilled career and enjoy what they're doing? So as you look down it, and then if you do obviously get a validated threat, being able to respond is critical as well. Being able to maybe, if you haven't got boots on the ground, then you perhaps need some form of orchestration or platform or scripting to be able to go make changes in your environment, hopefully nip it in the bud very quickly. So as you can see, when you look at detect and response, it's not just 2 guys looking at some tools. There's a whole army of people behind the scenes that are trying to make it more effective, to make it more valuable longer term, and obviously also to focus on the risks more specifically.
Yeah, you're because you're right. Threats come and go, but the risks, the risk is a organization side thing. That is something that you can assess and look at, and that's certainly something that we try to do, that inward out approach, I think, for a lot of our customers with our tool set. But yeah, I mean, the threat intelligence thing has always intrigued me, because I've been in philosophical discussions about should vendors do threat feeds, should they not, just to represent other organizations. I mean, what makes good intelligence? You say you've always kind of been a consumer of threat intelligence. I mean, what makes good intelligence, would you say? Because you can spend a lot of money on it, and is it something that organizations should or even can build themselves, given that they know their business well? Or is it always, should it be kept separate to almost kind of avoid that conflict of interest or bias or kind of happy ears? What's your experience been of sourcing a good threat intelligence feed?
It's a really good question, Matt, and I think ultimately the key components to good intelligence is, firstly, it needs to be accurate, needs to be relevant and timely. And by that, if you think about, I mean, there are numerous locations and places where you can get threat intelligence from. You can obviously pay for it. You can do open source intelligence, and with our business, we do that all the time. We're a research company, so we've got access to internal projects and resources that companies again, we're a security researcher, so we have the ability to provide to link in with lots of other parts of what Rapid7 does, and we add that into our product. So today, our threat intelligence is automatically added to our product so that our customers don't necessarily have to build that themselves. But there's always going to be a need, regardless of a provider, for companies to have a view of the landscape and the risks that they deem important for their core business, whether that be regional, whether that be via vertical. So there's always a need to be curating and making sure that the threat intelligence that the business is most concerned about is adequately catered for in the various feeds and open source intelligence. So when you buy feeds from providers, they can be very noisy. Generally they need curation, and so this kind of adds to the cost of building this yourself, where you're probably at minimum you're going to be looking at 1 or 2 people that are constantly really doing nothing more than ingesting paid feeds, open source intelligence, curating that for the purpose of the business, and then obviously being able to, one key component is being able to apply that to the technology that's in the customer environment, and that's a big challenge by itself. Because some systems or some feeds may provide you an MD5 for a particular indicator, and actually your system wants a SHA-1 or SHA-256, and you've got to then figure out how you can convert the two. So it's not as straightforward as just buying it and using it. So ideally, buying feeds that are integrated into the products is clearly the simplest option. But even then, there's still an element of figuring out day by day what's more important. And for a provider like us, I mean, we're managing detection and response across hundreds of customers, 24/7 across the globe, nearly every vertical that I can even think of. And what we see in one particular region or one customer, we can quickly curate that intelligence and bring that to bear on the rest of our customers, so they get value in advance of these things being made public and sort of being in the media activity. Now, we're always going to have an advantage there because we've got, we're currently managing well over 1 million assets for customers, and we can do data science, we can do frequency analysis, a whole host of analytical capabilities to help us find evil, generate intelligence, and push it into our products. Now, if you're going to build this yourself, find a provider that works well for you, has the level of intelligence that is relevant, and can obviously tailor for the risks for your business. And I think that's a good start for 10. Ideally, make sure you've got ways of applying that intelligence, because just buying a threat feed does not provide you any protection at all. You've got to be able to apply it in the environment. Yeah. And that's the key thing. I've seen that done many times, where organizations will buy threat feeds, threat intelligence, because it's in the, it's in the CISO handbook. You've got to have some kind of source of intelligence, but then the ability to apply it, to curate it, and make sure it's relevant and viable on a particular day is really difficult to do.
Yeah, you're right. So it's, definitely source some good, as you say, sort of high fidelity, low noise, relevant sources, but then certainly add that layer of your own business context, I guess, with the curation piece. That's really good, because as you say, there's a whole degree subject in its own right, but it's fascinating. You talked there about, it's a nice segue, and you talked about actually actioning stuff. So response, I mean, we've talked largely about the D of DNR detection, and obviously incident response is often separated out. Is that for a particular reason? Is it more challenging the detection? And what are the challenges of building an IR capability yourself, and what are the common pitfalls?
Again, it's a good question. The ability to respond is obviously a key component to manage detection and response. Again, if you're building it yourself, then you're looking to actually hire and retain people that have incident response skills and experience, and that's really about going head to head with attackers in your environment when you look at it. And I'll ask the question really is, how confident are people on this webinar or our customers on being able to respond effectively to an attack? And it's not necessarily, it's an attack that could last for weeks or months. So it's more than just an ability to provide capabilities. You may have people internally that can that have incident response experience, and they have done it before. But how long can you actually go head to head or head to toe against an attacker in your environment? It's not uncommon for for our incident response team to spend weeks chasing around attackers in customer environments. I mean, the days of an attacker sort of being tipped off that you're onto them, and then leaving the building and leaving, and clearing up their tools seems to have long gone. Now the attackers are quite keen to stay and complete their objective. So they're no longer shy of being caught or detected. And so they then tend to dig in even harder. So ultimately, you may have to literally force the attackers out of your environment. And that takes time and resources. But also response is not just about having the incident response people. It's about also being able to make changes to the environment quickly. We're seeing now, for example, our service now, we've introduced this year the ability to provide orchestration. So through our platform, if we see something that we deem to be critical and needs immediate action, as long as the customer has opted in for that particular option, we can actually make changes to the environment on their behalf. And again, ultimately this will be completely managed by the customer in terms of, so today we can, for example, contain an endpoint, stop a machine from actually allowing the attackers to move laterally in the environment. We can also block user accounts within sort of Active Directory kind of domains, and potentially even make changes to firewalls to block inbound calls, all done through orchestration. And so that means that we can apply response potentially within 10 minutes of the actual validation of the threat. Consider several years ago where that would then be a report to the customer, and then the customer might have to get their local MSS to go make those changes, which could take hours or even days. 3 hours now typically is a long time in a response situation. An attacker could potentially compromise 6 to 8 other systems in that time. So being able to nip it in the bud really quickly. So you're seeing now a much more focus on being able to take orchestrated actions. And that also then means that when you do have to engage an IR team, whether that be through your managed provider, or perhaps if you've got an IR retainer in place, if you're building it yourself, then I'd definitely say, definitely look at making sure you have an IR retainer with somebody that you trust in the environment. But bear in mind, it's going to take time for them to get on site. It's going to take time for them to put the statement of work together, and potentially even to deploy the tooling. Whereas again, from an MDR provider, we can go seamlessly from triage in the SOC to validation of a threat, and then we can have the IR team using the same technology, the same platform, bring them to bear on the problem within potentially just a matter of hours.
Yeah, you're right, and it's definitely that breadth of team and that experience, I guess, that enables you to respond, more quickly when you've got that larger team. And certainly, SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response is a very passionate subject that I've been talking about for several years, and I think it's very key to doing a lot of things in cybersecurity effectively. But I think not least is, it's great for staff retention, because it does, whether you're talking DNR, whether you're talking about, email phishing triage, it definitely frees up your analysts to do the more interesting stuff, which we all know is part of their job satisfaction. So yeah, response is very key. So I think
you're absolutely right, Matt, that the orchestration part of it is so keen for retention of your own people. And bear in mind that if you're building this yourself, your people are your most valuable asset, your most valuable weapon in this. So you ideally want everything they do to be a quick 30-second decision, having already triaged, maybe thrown the malware into sandbox and done the analysis, linked that with open source intelligence, so that your analyst essentially gets all the information in front of them there and then, so they can make a quick decision. You don't want to have them copy and pasting bits and pieces into virtual environments and then running simulations, because that all takes time that could be better put to use to responding and negating a threat rather than investigating it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we all know SOAR works 24/7 anyway. So again, you're getting past that one. So we're against time, and I want to make sure that Khalil gets time to show the product, and perhaps he can show some of the stuff we haven't talked about, which obviously equally applies about deception technology and quarantining and all that sort of stuff. Because that is in both the tool and obviously a good MDR service. But so Richard, if I can put you on the spot, to outsource or not to outsource, what is the answer? And you've got 3 bullet points you put in here. So let's start with the first one.
Yeah, let's be honest, I think there's no right or wrong answer. There's just what works best for you and for you as a customer and your vendor. The most successful kind of setups that I've seen is where you have a partnership between a vendor and internally. The best one in the world, service and an MDR provider is never going to know your environment as well as you do. And that's going to play an even more important part as technology is turning more to behavioral based detections, and they generally need more contacts. We do that today, and so a part of the relationship that it's the reason why we have people in interface between. So all customers of our managed detection response service get access to a customer advisor, security practitioner in their own rights, and their job is to help actually make the interface between the SOC, the analysts, and the technology for the customers. And so, for example, when we get a behavioral based indicator, we may have to go back to the customer and say, look, we don't know whether Bob is supposed to be in Guatemala today or not. Or we've seen these alerts or these particular indicators. We think they're benign, but actually they may not be. Could you please, confirm whether or not, you use this tool, or that should be happening in the environment. So it's always going to be important for the customer to have, a security team internally that understand their business and can make decisions on behalf of the business. So the most effective scenarios I've seen is where, the customer and the provider work in partnership to solve the problems, and the closer the customer and the partner are to one another determines the amount of value you get from the service. The closer that relationship, and the greater the value I think you get from an MDR provider. If you do decide to build it yourself, all I would say is that be conscious of developing these kind of capabilities. It gets more expensive as you mature your capabilities. The higher you aim for, the more costly it can become, because you're suddenly looking at bigger technologies, greater orchestration, more experienced staff, and that all costs extra money. And we haven't even considered the cost of proactive hunting. And that's really when you're looking for evil in the absence of alerts and detections from your technology stack. Again, for me, it's cost effective to do that across hundreds of customers with the team that we have. If you're building that yourself from scratch, then actually it's a lot of time, a lot of data, a lot of effort, highly skilled people for very little output typically. So I think the first question is decide how much you want to invest yourselves. I think it's always keen to have a source of highly talented internal security people, and then decide how far you want to go with it from there, and get an outsourcer that can work with you in partnership to fill the gaps.
Yeah, you're right. It absolutely is. I think use that talent. It's we haven't even talked about APTs, for instance, and how difficult they are to defend against. That only works if you are in partnership with the right people, because of the investment in that attack. Although I don't think that's the biggest threat to our listeners. We've talked a little bit about source. I'm going to skip that one, but certainly whether whatever amount you decide to in-house of a detection response service, make sure you continue to invest in your people, and that's again where we talked about SOAR can be the real return on investment. And then the last bit that we'd put was obviously, and you touched on it there actually, not all MDRs are equal. Certainly threat hunting is not something that's included in many MDR providers, and that's the stuff that gets the 0-day threat attacks that isn't pickable up by signatures or that sort of thing. So yeah, all of those things.
MDR is about response. All I'd say is MDR's become a very popular marketing exercise these days. So all I would say is MDR is about response. If you're picking a provider, go talk to them about the response they can provide, because everyone's selling it and not all providers can deliver it effectively. So ask them to show you. We're happy to. I mean, we have done, we do virtual SOC tours for our customers. We're happy for customers to speak to our managers, our SOC leads, our incident response team, so that we build confidence that you're getting what you're paying for. So all I'd say is, take advantage, do the due diligence on your provider to make sure that they're not just rebadging some kind of managed SIM or traditional MSS service to be MDR when it isn't really. MDR is about providing answers, not about throwing alerts to customers and expecting them to do the work.
Exactly. There's SIMs for that if you want one of those. So thank you. And I mean, the great thing, I think, and we touched on this at the beginning, and I know Richard's as passionate about the product as he is about the service, and certainly his team are our greatest critics and greatest customers of the product. So establishing your SOC with the right technology and the people and process is a challenge for most security teams. As Khalil laid out at the beginning, it's difficult. So there's multiple options where we can help with that, whether it's the actual product, Insight IDR. And you can see there that the new 2021 Magic Quadrant for SIM is being delayed, but it's coming out shortly. But basically, that was last year. So you can see, what we're trying to do there is using our heritage of user behavior analytics and attacker behavior analytics from Metasploit and the threat intelligence community. We're trying to basically give Insight IDR customers answers within minutes and deploy it within days, not months. And there's over 900 out-of-the-box detections in there, and that's something that Khalil will show us shortly. And then the MDR service that Richard leads is built from the ground up to help security teams of all sizes strengthen their security posture, find attackers, and stay ahead of those emerging threats. And that's using both our security expertise as pen testers and Metasploit community and researchers, as well as our tools that you've seen. So again, hands-on, 24/7, proactive threat hunting, effective response support, and tailored security guidance. So thank you for that, Richard. You and I are back shortly to answer questions, so keep the questions coming. But for the moment, that's thank you from us, and I will pass back to Khalil to do a fantastic demo on IDR.
Thank you, Matt and Richard, for this great discussion around detection and response. Great insights about each and every target, addressing each and every challenge I've been talking about as well at the beginning of this webinar. So I will be now starting with the demo. However, I would like to start with the architecture so that we explain what we do in the customer environment. So when it comes to Insight IDR, Rapid7 SaaS-based SIM, why I'm saying SaaS, because the console, the technology is hosted within Rapid7 Insight Cloud, the Insight platform, where we'll have all the different analytics running. But for sure, when we talk about SIM solutions, security information event management, we need to rely as well and get the visibility on what's going on in each and every environment, either on-prem or maybe within the cloud services. For this, we collect data by leveraging our Insight Collector, a single piece of software which can be deployed on top of a Linux or Windows machine, multiple flavors as well, a virtual machine, for example, or even as physical blade. So what we're doing here is we'll be collecting the data from the existing network security tools, the like of, for example, firewalls, antivirus as well, authentication logs from, for example, our foundational as well event sources talking about Active Directory, LDAP, DSCP when we talk about as well the network information, the endpoint devices by leveraging as well our agent to get a little bit better visibility on what's happening on each and every endpoint. Our agent can be deployed on top of Linux, Mac, Book, as well as Windows machines, multiple flavor. And this agent doesn't have only analytical capabilities, but although it can help you to do some active containment, the like of quarantining the asset, or for example, killing a malicious process. So all these data then will be collected through the collector, which as well will be able to leverage your cloud services as a SaaS, Office 365, Salesforce, or infrastructure as a service, the like of AWS or Azure. Then all this data will be compressed, encrypted, sent encrypted to Rapid7 platform, where we'll be running the sophisticated analytics on the data by correlating all the information related to the user's account, authentication, the alert, the privilege, etc., to understand the regular behavior for each and every user in the environment, while also looking for the known indicator of compromise. So along with this as well, in conjunction with the collector, we're talking about the agent which can be deployed on the machine and connected remotely so that they can communicate directly with the platform. So in this case, we'll get as well the visibility we've been talking about at the beginning with the remote working scenario nowadays with these challenging times. And we have the ability as well to deploy deception technology. So the like of different type of intruder traps using honeypots, honey users, honey files. And we can leverage our Insight network sensor with the capability of deep packet inspection to be able to understand what is the traffic which is running, application which is running in your environment. So we'll talk about it during the demo quickly. By default, within the solution, you will have the foundational automation workflows. And then for sure, we'll talk about later on, we can integrate natively with Rapid7 source solution Insight Connect. So being said this, let's move on to the demo side of things. So this is the console that will be connecting to it from anywhere. It's hosted by Rapid7 Insight platform. So one of the things that Insight IDR does very well, when we address the topic of visibility, the first challenge, the most important challenge when it comes to security team, is to present the information to you in an easy way, and help you as well, give you the ability to drill down to other specific data. For example, here we can see, for example, at a glance, all what's happening in your network. For example, the dashboard is showing us that we have more than 1,300 users. These users have generated more than 260,000 of events for the last 24 hours. Out of those 262,000 of events, we don't have alerts, which is good. We'll talk about, we've been talking about the alert fatigue and the false positive, as well as we showing the notable behavior. So this is more a classification of events between the event we're collecting, the alert, which is the adverse event, and notable behavior, which are like, is not really something which needs to be considered as an alert. We don't want to flood you with the 100,000 of alerts on every day, because these are mostly legitimate behavior. But in the event of any incident of alert, each and every notable behavior become a vital context understanding what's transpired behind the alert and after the alert itself. So to give you an example here, talking about account lockout, we won't need, for example, an alert for each and every account lockout in the environment. However, in the case we are triggering or firing an alert which is related to a successful account from a new country or a successful access to a new system for the first time, it's good to see all the different account lockouts which been before and after the alert, or all the different notable behavior that transpired. So giving you the ability to understand what happened so that you can take the action in a faster manner. The most important things is to help you to focus on what matters most and to be able to detect, contain early in the attack chain. Classification of the different attacks within the attack chain, from the visibility to exploit to the infiltration. Once the attacker in the network start the reconnaissance, and then jumping to the lateral movement, and then to inflict the damage through the mission target. Again, I would like to point out as well on the visibility here, providing you with the different users profile. So as we are collecting data from the endpoint, from the foundation event sources, the like of Active Directory, DSCP, DNS, the firewall, the antiviruses, correlating all these data together, we do a profiling for each and every user, understanding what is the legitimate behavior and what is the unwanted activity which might happen. And this will enable us through this baseline to trigger the alert as well early in the attack chain. You would be able as well to, in case, for example, some of the users, you want to track them, you can put them on a watch list to understand if there is any kind you are suspicious about their behavior. So in that case, you can track them quickly. We show you as well a map which is showing you the location from which the employees or people, we never know who's been connecting to our services, either in the cloud or through the VPN to the corporate network. So it's good to get this visibility to understand who's trying to access, where the failure are, like seeing, for example, we are here in the Middle East and seeing someone connecting from Russia. Unless we have some people working in Russia, this might be an indication of an attack or someone is trying to infiltrate. So let's go and check what is this profiling I've been talking about. So here for each as well, each every user would try to understand the different account associated tied to this user. Like here we have David Bowie, he had D Bowie, we have David Bowie. So here is more Active Directory, but in case you have Okta, you have Duo, we have this integration which will enable us as well to do the correlation between his Office 365 account, his Active Directory account, his Okta account, for example. So that we would understand each and every profile, which will help us on baselining, understanding what's running on in the environment. The different groups, this admin groups, this account is tied to, as well as the different authentication activity. It's good to understand what each and every user is doing, where they are connecting to, the different asset, their primary asset. This will help us as well to get an understanding on the asset from which these people are accessing or to which they are accessing, the cloud services. So we are mainly getting this information from the integration with the cloud services, as well as in case you're running a web proxy, for example, or even from a DNS perspective, you can see all these different kind of transaction, understand the different as well traffic toward the cloud itself. If already an antivirus has been as well integrated, that's why we would recommend to get as much data as you can. So this will help us to get a better visibility once again. So here, for example, if there's an antivirus which has been plugged to the tool from data collection perspective as an event source, we can see what is the virus that is left out there or left alone there, as well as you can see the different IDS alerts. You can get this either through our the network sensor, which leverage different rules from a Suricata perspective for IDS, or in case you have already an IDS and the system will provide you this information. All this will help in case of any alerts which might be triggered to related to this user, understand what might this user be doing and what he's having, like these kind of viruses are important to know. This might be as well exploited. Talking about the visibility is good as well to jump in quickly and talk about the data collection. It's a very simple way to go and add the different event sources. As you see here, is more as a wizard. We have the foundational event sources, the LDAP, Active Directory, DSCP, understanding the attribution between user, IP to asset. We have as well integration with Rapid7 products, or from a platform perspective, inside VM, DV Cloud, our cloud security posture management solution, a Metasploit, #1 Pentest 2. From there as well, we can see the different buckets. One of them is more security data, everything related to firewall, IDS, antivirus, cloud services as well. And we do integrate with third-party alert. The idea here is to consolidate everything and provide you with one single pane of glass to see all your different alerts, so you can as well take the action early and in the attack chain. The last point I want to point out too is the fact that even if we are adding on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and this is the value when it comes to a SaaS-based SIM, different type of event sources, new parsing to be able to leverage and understand the technology that's running out in our customers and prospects. We still have the ability to read each and every type of logs from the time that this log is being getting in a readable format and available to us through, for example, syslog, or going and watching the directory or reading the file directly. So this is what will provide us with the different visibility. What we need to understand is the ability from a detection perspective. There is two built-in detection created within the tool itself: user behavior analytics and attacker behavior analytics. So user behavior analytics, which will help expose the risky and anomalous behavior across your environment. So what we do here is we focus on uncovering the different patterns and insight to understand the evidence of compromise, to understand what the legitimate and illegitimate behavior as well. And since it's focused on behavior, it's not a static indicator of threat, user behavior analytics can help you find attacks that bypass threat intelligence and alert on malicious behavior early in the attack chain. And this is the most important goal when it comes to monitoring, to be able to contain the attack, to detect it early. So there's too many of them. When we talk about user behavior, these are account related. For example, account created, enabled, privilege escalation, lateral movement, the detection evasion, event log deletion. There's too many of them, hundreds of them. And to let you know that these rules, along with our product engineering team, are created by our managed detection and response team. So, which I wanted to say here is, although you might go with the SIM only inside IDR, you will still be benefiting from the expertise of our MDR, which are at this point in time managing the detection and response for more than 600 users out there. Along with the user behavior analytics, we still need to keep an eye on the indicator of compromise and attacker tactics, techniques, and procedures. As you know, Rapid7 has multiple projects out there from a research perspective: Sonar, Heisenberg, Metasploit projects. Our managed detection and response customers, the incident response and penetration testing engagement help us to see constant stream of threats. So during the threat investigation, our experts, analysts, the zero-day kind of vulnerability and attack, the stealthy type of technique that the attacker are using. So what we're trying to do here is more reverse engineering, understand what the technique those attacker or tools are leveraging, and then create the indicator based on this. So if I want to give you a quick one, because unfortunately we have limited time of demonstration. I would be more than happy to expand on this more with the one-to-one discussion or dedicated as well demo for you guys out there. So if I type Mimikatz, we have too many of them from an attacker tool perspective. PowerShell, the like of, for example, the download of the Cradle, the obfuscation, the different execution through PowerShell itself, from a stealthy technique, or for example, the suspicious process, which is launched directly within PowerShell itself. We provide you as well the ability all the time to go and create your own custom alerts, because we do understand every customer has his own unique use cases. So although we're building all this, curating them from MDR perspective, team perspective and experience, as well as our attacker behavior analytics, which are crafted based on all the different projects I've been talking about, you still might need to get your own alerts based on your own use cases. And we provide you this ability. It's very straightforward. You go and create the different alerts based on different patterns. The like of, for example, anytime there is someone is copying a file, you can go directly and alert on it. Or you can have as well the ability not to create alerts, only to create labels. And we provide you the ability as well to go and add additional threat feed, for example. So talking of which, and all these alerts, let's go and talk about investigation. The value when it comes to Rapid7 Insight IDR is not only notifying you via email every time there is a new kind of attack or new alert or new incident. What we do here is we create a timeline by tying out, building in all the different alerts, notable behavior, which are associated to the same user, same machine. So if I want to give you an example here we see the honeypot access, leveraging deception technology from Rapid7. So this is the alert that I'm focusing on now. However, we'll show you all the different things which happen before this alert has been triggered. And what I want to say here is more about, again, the visibility, helping you understand the sequence of events which has been involved in an attack on the environment itself. So this will help you as well to be able to contain in a better manner, understand where you need to start containing. For example, we see a spear phishing URL detected, and I can all the way click on it and move to the alert in question. Then after the spear phishing, we can see there's execution of PowerShell to dump credential through Mimikatz, downloading of Cradles as well. And then we can see the attacker has starting doing the lateral movement, or mainly reconnaissance before lateral movement, by scanning the network. And this has been detected through the honeypot. So we're saying here that this workstation has attempted to connect to the network honeypot different times, multiple times, port different TCP ports, and then we provide you with the evidence. For each and every alert, we'll be providing you evidence. But what we need here is to leverage more data at some point in time. So we provide you more than just the name of the users, as well as the machine where we've seen all these different alerts, or the user associated to the alert, the actors themselves. We can help you to go and query, get more data from the endpoint by selecting different jobs. And for this, we'll need the agent to be deployed. So I don't say at this point in time, it's recommended, optional to have the agent on top of it. Our agent leverage additional EDR capabilities, endpoint detection response. And based on my humble experience, what I've seen with my customers as well as my prospects, it's mandatory these days, is a must to have this, to leverage the additional capability of the agent to get the visibility on the endpoint. Once we have the agent, then anytime the alert is triggered, we can go and see different type of information, query them. The like of current processes running, the network connection, the user session, for example, and too many others as well. It's not only about getting data from the endpoint itself. We provide you with the ability to go and collect the data which we correlated from the different event sources. Please provide me with all the different logs events which are tied to this users or to this workstation. As you can see, we have the ability all the way as well to add any additional user we might be suspicious about. Another alert which might be triggered at the same time, have been triggered at the same time, we might need to do this research about another user or another asset. All the firewall activity of this user or of this workstation, the DNS queries, for example, antivirus, IDS, so to provide us with the best visibility we can get so we can take the right action in order to quickly contain the alert itself. We have the ability all the way, if we're doing, for example, the analysis itself, the analyst might need to go and search for additional logs to understand what's transpired here. For example, firewall log, and then I can filter on based on the asset itself, and then I can go and add it. I might get some logs from the endpoint activity, for example, and so on. So once, for example, we get all this information, we'll have them ready there. So we don't need to then create or go to another page or create a report out of it. So it's interactive. I can click on the, for example, provide me with the DNS query. Show me all the different DNS query. And if I go and look here, this is the user, he's been on this asset connected, and then these are the different queries that this user has been sending from a DNS perspective for resolution. If I go out and see this list, we can see there's too many good things, normal things. It's connecting to Office 365. It's connecting to YouTube, should be okay. To his portal, this is a company called Anonymous. And then we can see the spear phishing happened there, Anonymous with the 0 instead of the O. So this is, again, giving us an indication what happened out there. And then we have the list with all the different artifacts, when he's been connected, at what time, and he's been connecting to which site. Similar things with the current process, with the asset authentication. We can all the way add notes, as well as we can export this, and we can assign this to the different analysts. And when we add notes, each analyst will have the data here, and even they have this access directly as well to the additional data they might be interested on looking at. Then what we need as well is getting data and visibility is great, but as we all know, the most important thing is to be able to go and contain the threat itself. So as I said, from an automation perspective, inside IDR provide built-in foundational automation workflows from the like of, for example, go and contain by leveraging the agent, for example. In case there is a malicious process involved, we'll kill the process, like a malware, for example. Enabling user or disabling users, more when it take action is more disabling user. Disabling user on Active Directory. Disabling user on Okta, for example. We can as well leverage ticketing systems, like if there's a process internally, we need to create a ticket, like we have direct built-in integration with Jira and ServiceNow. However, you can all the way as well leverage our source solution Insight Connect to provide you with the ability to get more automation capabilities. So what I want to say here is to unlock more automation capability as so you optimize your responses and contain the attack early in the attack chain. So we can all the way as well, when we talk about automation, go and create a triggers. Rather than taking action manually, we would say like every time there is this kind of flagged hash on the asset, please go and, for example, quarantine this asset leveraging the agent. Or if there is something related to a user account, disable the user on the Active Directory. All this will be done automatically. So along with the capability of detection and response, we provide you with the ability of going and visualizing what you have, what's running in the environment itself. And this is through the log search and dashboard. I start quickly with the log search. So as we see here, for example, we're getting different logs from different firewalls. This one, for example, this is the raw data we are getting. The value with the Insight IDR is the ability to part this data and rush it quickly. So here, all what we have is the IP address. What we're providing you as well, this IP address is, for example, we know based on the correlation to Carl. This is his workstation. So provided we've done additional enrichment and parsing, correlation, understanding this IP is attributed to which asset, and this asset is the associated to which user. Along with this as well, provide some GeoIP information and enrichment, the like of this user is connecting to the Google Cloud in the United States. So all this is great for visibility. From there, for example, I can all the way go and filter out of it using the simple query. This is the log entry query language from Rapid7 SQL syntax-like. So I can all the way go and put a simple query by putting the IP, the pattern itself, or I can as well leverage the different advanced query. And I don't need to type each and everything. I can focus on this user. All I need to do is go and query this pattern. So directly, this is the simple pattern. If I put advanced, we'll have the where, as I said, SQL-like syntax. From there, I might say, I need to see everything happening from this machine on the firewall, the different direction of the traffic, inbound, outbound. So I would say group by, for example, direction. And we have the ability to group by doing a multi-group by, which means that I might be grouping by direction and show me at the same time going the different based on the direction is connected to which domain is trying to connect to my user, and so on. For example, if I want to do a multi-group buy, I would say, for example, show me as well the domain itself or the GeoIP organization, for example. So I can just add here GeoIP, and then it would, in a way, it will provide me with the information. So rather than typing it, and then now I'm just checking not only the different direction of the traffic, as well having some information. So we can see most of his traffic is outbound in this case, and is going to soft layer technology when it comes to the outbound, and to Facebook as well, from an outbound perspective. So so this is providing the visibility, and the visibility doesn't end as well on the log side. We can go and build a different dashboard, which will help us to then go and drill down in the log themselves. So if I want to give you quickly, for example, an example here, we have the enhanced endpoint telemetry, and this is to talk about the ability of the agent itself, not only provide you with the detection and the ADR capabilities by firing the alerts, we can provide you even with the visibility on what's happening on the endpoint, the top process running, the executable in the unusual path, for example, the process start activity. And you can, all the time, you have the ability to build your own cards, or you can, for example, leverage Rapid7 library. So unfortunately, we don't have much time. I need to pass it back, but what I want to focus on here is the ability to get from visibility directly on the dashboard side to go to the logs, where we'll be directly creating the query for you based on the dashboard you've created. So we filtered on the most important things, the things which matches most for your search when it comes to log visualization and search perspective. So I know that this was a quick demo. I hope that you've been able to see some value out of it. I'm done here, and we'll be moving out to the next session, which is the Q&A. Thank you again, everyone.
Great. Khalil, thank you so much. That was really a very exciting demo, power-packed, and the fact that we could explore so much about the IDEA platform in the last 20 to 30 minutes is fantastic. You mentioned that you couldn't deep dive, but I'm pretty sure that the Spire Solutions team and Rapid7 teams are open to having one-on-one demos for those that are interested. I also want to thank Matt and Rich for their interactive discussion. It was really nice to see the orchestra. It was really nice to see the discussion between them both on detection, response, manage or not, what to consider, what not to consider. So I want to thank you all. I want to open the floor now for some questions, because we promised our attendees that we will be taking a few questions towards the end of this session. So we have about 15 minutes, and that gives us a chance to take a couple of questions. I already have a couple of questions that have come in, and we've just, there were a few questions that came in, similar lines, so we've just tried to structure it. One of the questions that I have here is, what is the minimum amount of staff needed to run an MDR service, and how successful can a hybrid model be? So I think this is for Matt or Rich.
Yeah, I mean, Richard's obviously run many of these over the years, so I'll let him fill in. But 9 was the answer he gave during the talk. I think the important thing is it's basically one, make sure you've got enough staff to do that follow the sun model, but it's equally how much of the detection response service do you want to do, from all the way down through to threat hunting. So it depends would be my short answer, but I'll let Richard give the professional answer.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to run 24/7, then in terms of analysts behind the single, again, assuming you've got a single pane of glass, then you're probably looking at 9 analysts. But then, as we already discussed, you need the threat intelligence side of it in curation. So you're probably talking about a couple of people in that team as well. And then you've got to integrate all that work together. So you probably need some developers, people that can script, orchestrate the work between them. So you're probably talking about a tooling team and sort of a couple of people there. And it goes on and on. You then need your management kind of structure to be able to manage them. You need incident responders that can take the work from the SOC and then go focus on particular events, and so on and so forth. So it can grow very quickly. And I think, to be honest, today there's a more compelling argument today to outsource some of this work to an MDR provider than there ever has been. People used to think this was the sort of remit of large enterprises, but the costs have been so much more competitive now. I'm pretty certain you can get an MDR service provision for less than it will cost you for a couple of full-time analysts. I mean, it's really been a lot more cost effective.
Fantastic. I think that also answers partly one of the other questions that I'm looking at. So someone's asking, can we not just invest in prevention and upgrade our firewalls, disk encryption, etc., instead of detection and response, which seems complex and expensive?
We've done that though. That's where we are today, isn't it? We've invested in prevention, and what happens when the prevention doesn't prevent it? Then you're into being able to detect and respond. I think everyone has to consider now that breaches are inevitable. You can't guarantee this is not going to happen, so you've got to get much more effective at being able to detect it and being able to respond to it when your preventative measures don't work. It's not to say that they don't provide the first line of defense for preventing any kind of threat. You've got to have preventive measures, and the better, the more effective, then the less you need to invest behind the scenes. But you're always going to get things that breach those preventive measures.
And I think that a couple of things to add to that for sure, Richard, I think is, we used to see the time between a new vulnerability being released and actually exploit in the wild that could use that either through the Metasploit or Exploit DB. That used to be months. We're now seeing that in days, if not less, because obviously, as the attackers get more sophisticated, there's a whole ecosystem. You can go and buy a software development kit for Zeus malware and come up with a different hash so that it's undetectable. So it's a far bigger problem than it used to be in terms of the speed at which new exploits are being released on the back of vulnerabilities. So you can't rely on signature based or yet another firewall.
Great, thank you. Mohammed from Oman is asking, can you talk more about threat hunting? I think one of you made a reference to hunting during the session, and there's interest to know more.
Yeah, I'll take that one if you like. And I think there's different determinations of hunting. I mean, again, I think hunting in my mind has always been hunting or looking for evil in the absence of alerts or events. And it's very different to a lot of providers where they'll call hunting essentially getting an alert and then go looking or investigating that threat to its conclusion. So hunting really is the ability, because you kind of need to assume that advanced attackers potentially have done their research and their homework. They know what infrastructure their victim has, and they're custom building a threat or an exploit to work in that environment and subvert the technology that particular victim has deployed. That's kind of the mindset I think you need to kind of take on when you start thinking about proactive hunting. Then the question is well, how would you find that in the noise and all the artifacts that these systems are collecting? How would you bubble that up from the fact that you're not going to get a detection? Because this, again, it's probably maybe custom built. Maybe no one has seen this particular exploit ever, and you're and it's specific to that customer. And I've worked with those. I've actually got some detections on my machine from a long time ago, which are still not detected today because they were only used once at one customer by an advanced attacker. So hunting really is then taking, it's data science, it's big data, it's taking process events, registry kind of read write, file read and writes, and then using data science and analytics to bubble up, anomalies and behaviors based on methodologies that have been successful in the past, and then using typically your most experienced analysts to make sense of those and figure out what it is that's going to actually work in that environment. It's costly, and I think actually it doesn't produce a lot of results. It really doesn't. I mean, we perform hunting across all our customers all the time, and actually the amount of the value of the results we get back is quite low. But if you do get a result, then it's probably the most valuable thing we will ever provide that customer, because it means that not only has the existing security investment missed it, it means that perhaps even our own technology has missed it, and it was only found by a senior analyst performing data analytics, and it probably would have gone undetected for months or even years if you hadn't performed that activity.
Right, well, thanks for answering that. And I guess we can take one last question before we wrap up the session with possibly your respective 2 cents worth of closing comments. So this is actually a trick question and probably a tongue twister as well. can we insource an outsourced MDR service, and how can we do it? This is one of the questions here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, actually, because a lot of organizations obviously have outsourced, but as they over time they're maturing their security model, their security, they're growing their security team, and we have seen customers that have want to take some element of that detection response back in house, and certainly that's a great long-term strategy for many organizations. I think it's you have to reverse engineer what the reason to outsource in the first instance. Which bit do you want to bring back in, and which bit can you bring back in first, and what coverage do you need from your partner or your MDR provider in the meantime? So for instance, the threat hunting that Richard just talked about, that's a really tricky thing to do. So that's not something I personally would insource straight away. Maybe some of the more detection type stuff, some of the automation, that sort of thing, might be easier to bring that in. And certainly, Richard, I think we've had some customers that you've helped them do this themselves, haven't you? Where we've given them some coverage whilst they've kind of started to bring some of that responsibility in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're going to build it out, I mean, again, you don't need to look at, MDR is not the end result, I suppose, of a cybersecurity strategy implementation. I mean, again, if you're going to build this out yourselves, then it makes sense. And a lot of customers do this really effectively, where they get MDR at the front to essentially provide air cover whilst they're building out the capabilities over time. And whether they ever get to the the final outcome, it doesn't matter, because they've got the benefit of a second set of eyes looking across the alerts and the technology for that period of time. And ultimately, and it's something that our customers, as they mature, they will want to be able to do more themselves. That's why Rapid7 is building products that allow customers to take ownership and develop capabilities themselves, because we know that talent and we can't be there for everybody. And over time, we're also working on methods where we will provide, maybe you do the triage investigation, maybe we'll just provide the response, and maybe the hunting capabilities, the bits that don't make sense or don't scale effectively. That's absolutely something that Rapid7 is looking at being able to provide. So you don't have this, is it MDR or do it yourself? Doesn't need to be one or the other. It can actually be an integration of both.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Someone's asking, how can we schedule a demo for our team? As I mentioned earlier, just reach out to the Spire Solutions team after the webinar. Just reach out to the Rapid7 team, and we'll be more than happy to give you our time, attention, and help you with your detection and response capabilities. With that, Matthew, Richard, Khalil, thank you so much for joining us on this session. Quick round of any closing comments, any tips or suggestions to our audience today before we move to a wrap. Maybe we start with Matthew.
Yeah, I think to be honest, it's the fact that people are listening is the first step. I remember the days of there's only 5 Mac viruses, you just buy another firewall. No one ever got fired for buying another Cisco firewall despite the price. But you do have to, if this is something you haven't thought about before, if this is something that you've joined today to try and understand, what you should do with detection response, I think the fact that you're asking that question is great. But I would say don't underestimate the threat that's out there. And I would say definitely partner with Spire, with us, with whoever is in the right place for your organization and its maturity to make sure that you address this, because preventative, the days of just spending your money on prevention are unfortunately long gone.
Absolutely. Khalil, your final thoughts?
Yeah, so I would like to get a little bit to the basics when it comes to the security and threat and risk perspective on the whole objective for each and every organization to manage and lower the overall risk. So I just want to say that the detection and response is the important part. Richard and Matt provided us great insight on why we need during the session, as well as addressing your question about the prevention, but this doesn't mean that we don't need the prevention. We don't need to stay as well proactive through, for example, the approach of vulnerability management, reducing the attack surface, the risk itself, for even not only on the host and infrastructure, thinking about the application, which are more and more published nowadays. So how the attacker can leverage the weaknesses of our application by leveraging application scanning tool from security perspective. Moving to the cloud now is even making things more complex. So we still as well think about the cloud security posture management tool. So all this is to say that from a proactive approach, we need to be able to reduce the risk, while as well we need to stay responsive to the unwanted activity, because threats are there every day, like has been explained by Matt and Richard.
Mm.
Great, thank you. And with that, Richard, your closing comments?
Thanks, Naveen. And would just like to say that I think that everybody needs D&R capabilities. Whether you decide to outsource it or build it yourself, every business needs the ability to detect and respond to threats that get past the preventative technologies. So if you've never considered this, and the capabilities we've discussed today, you need to consider building and developing those capabilities in some capacity. It's complex, it's difficult, even for us, it's challenging. We don't get it right all the time, and we've tripped ourselves over more times than I think anyone would ever expect. All I'd say is, please consider D&R as being a critical component to your cybersecurity strategy.
Well, I think I dare say that detection and response is not a choice. So please do invest time, resources, and energy in building your capabilities. Do it yourself or reach out to industry partners, reach out to companies that like us or anybody else that you're comfortable with, but make sure that you're heading in that direction. As most of us always say, security is not an end result, it's actually a journey. And during this journey, you'll obviously have multiple ecosystem partners that get plugged in and plugged out, but then the journey needs to keep going on. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today at our virtual event on detection and response. Based on all the discussions, the demonstrations, as well as the Q&As that we've just had, you should probably know by now whether or not you need to outsource or not outsource. But at the same time, we've underlined the fact that regardless of outsourcing or not outsourcing, detection and response is a key element. Detection and response must be part of your cybersecurity strategy. So thank you once again. We have with us Matthew Ryder, Richard Harris, and Khalil Farhat from Rapid7 who shared their time, knowledge with you. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to all our participants. On behalf of Spire Solutions, as well as Rapid7, we thank you once again and signing off from today's session. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.